Welcome back to another exciting episode. Today's topic is very interesting. It is on dharma and Swadharma. We have a remarkable person, a great speaker with deep knowledge in dharma shastras and dharmas. In fact, Sanskrit. He is Sriram Subramanian. He is a IT professional who works in Microsoft. He's based in Seattle, USA. And he happens to be my classmate in Masters in Sanskrit, MA in Sanskrit from Hindu University of America. So I've known him for some time, and he has extraordinary knowledge, deep knowledge, and he's very dedicated to the Indian knowledge systems. So welcome, Sriram Mahodaya, to our podcast. So let me give you a little bit about dharmas. What is a dharma? And then you can take it from there. You tell us what is a Swadharma, how is it important in the current day world, how does it apply to the 21st century world citizen in this context. So when we talk about dharma, this word is used, overused, misused, abused in this current day world. Right? So it has many meanings. So when somebody from North India has a different perspective, somebody from South India has a different perspective. So when someone says it is my dharma, especially in North India, it means that is their religion, right? So when hamara dharma aisa kehta hai, it means our religion says like that. So the dharma in some sense means religion. Dharma in other sense means the duties of an individual. That is where the Swadharma comes, which we will talk in a little bit. So the word dharma itself is very interesting. If you look at the etymological meaning, it means dharanat dharma muchyate. That which binds the society together is dharma. What is it that binds the society? And where is it written? It is written in our primary text, the Vedas. Chodana lakshanardho dharmaha. Ardha Sangraha says Chodana Lakshanardho Dharmaha, which means the content, the substance that is indicated in the Vedas is dharma. So the Vedas talk about dharma. So that is where our dharma comes from. So Chodana Lakshanardho Dharmaha, Dharanat Dharma Muchyate. And when we look at where it comes into an individual's life, we talk about Purushartha, right? Purushartha is everybody has certain goals in life, right? So the four goals that are prescribed to us are Purushartha. Purushaihi ardhyate iti Purushartha. Purushartha actually has a definition. Purushaihi ardhyate iti Purushartha. The one that is desired by the Purushas is Purushartha. So who is a Purusha? Purusha is Puri Shayate iti Purusha. Puri is a city. Puri means a city. Puram. Puri is a city or a dwelling place. Puri Shayate. The one who dwells in a city, the dweller of a city is Purusha. So what is a Puri Shayate? Navadvare Pure Dehi. We have heard that. Navadvare Pure Dehi. A city with 9 gates is, what is it? It is a metaphorical representation of our body, right? So you consider our body as a city with 9 gates. What are the 9 gates? 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, mouth, and then we have 2 at the bottom, which are like gates, 9 gates. So these are Puri Shayate iti Purusha, the one who dwells in that city, which is our Jiva. So this Jiva has 4 goals, which are Purushartha. Right? So those are dharma, ardha, kama, moksha. So that is where we come. So dharma, ardha is prosperity, wealth and all that. Kama is desire, moksha is liberation. So here we come to dharma. Now dharma is a set of instructions for individuals, for families, for society to have to come together to work for a common goal, which is survival of the self and the society, and also for liberation. Now, Sriram Mahodaya, tell us what is Swadharma, which is what is an individual's dharma? What does an individual to do in their life to have a fulfilling life, either in this life or outside? So you have spoke about Swadharma in multiple places. I've listened to one of the videos. So tell us a little bit about what is Swadharma. If you please lead us, please take it from here.
Thank you, Rajeev Mahodaya. Thank you for this opportunity. Welcome everybody, and my heartfelt gratitude for listening to this. Before we get into this, right, and you mentioned that dharma, the word itself, has got different meanings. And coming from South India, I want to poke a little fun. North Indians would call it dharam, not dharma, but that's okay. That's also one of the wrongly, like one of those untranslatable words, right? Like, and largely it's related to religion. Now, thank you for giving that context, and totally agree with you. It's a very good summary, and whatever that our shastras say, they are aligned with those 4 purusharthas. It's important to note that we don't have one single text. We have a good understanding of the evolution of what is right. We have shrutis and smritis, and we have the understanding of what shrutis are eternal, and smritis are malleable, that they depend on the time and location or whatnot. And then all of them are aligning us or taking towards, they accommodate the pursuits. That's the most important part. It's a place for everything, but eventually leading to moksha. And then when you have that as the definition of dharma, then the question is, what is Swadharma? And the easiest way to see that is, what is one's own dharma? Like, what is my dharma? That's the easiest way to look at Swadharma is. And then before going into what Swadharma is, let's talk about, like, why is it relevant, right? Why do I worry about that? Like, yes, shastras are leading us towards moksha, but important questions that we ask is, what is the right thing to do in my life? Like, we play different roles, we have different whatever, right? Like a dad or student or professional or whatnot. Wherever we go, this question comes up, like, what is the right thing to do? Am I doing the right thing? And why do I have to do the right thing, right? Like, so what if it's right or wrong? Why do I have to do the right thing? And what happens if I don't do the right thing, right? These are all some of the eternal questions that we ask. And if you notice that, even the conversations that in Mahabharata, like, you can see these questions coming up off again and again and again. And these are thousands of years old of text, and these questions are repeated. And we still have those questions, which shows the importance of these questions, right? Like, we need to know what is the right thing to do.
Yeah. Mahodaya, let me pause you for a moment. So when we talk about Swadharma, it is not for one particular society or nation or an ethnic group or anything, right? So everybody should have a Swadharma in this world, like, right? So in our context, it was said by the Shrutis and by the Smritis. So tell us about what is a Shruti and Smriti, first of all, for some of us who are not familiar, from the audience who are not familiar with it.
Thank you, Mahodaya. Shrutis, we refer to the Vedas as the Shrutis because they are like, they were listened, they were heard, and they were not written by any human. We believe that they are apaurishaya. They were not written by any human beings, and then they are eternal, right? So they are the foundation of what our dharma is, what our Swadharma is. And then smritis are more prescriptive text that expand upon that build upon the foundation of the Vedas, and then they go expound into certain cases, right? Like take the case of Manu Smriti, for example. It goes on and on of, like, what is the right thing for a Brahmana to do? What is the right thing for a Kshatriya to do? What are the civil laws and what are criminal civil laws and whatnot? It goes expounds upon that. And then we have various other shastras as well.
So these smritis, there are many, Parashara Smriti, Manu Smriti, and so on. Do you think that they have, because they, unlike Vedas, there is only one collection of Vedas. There are 4 Vedas, but the Veda Rashi is one. You cannot change them. It is not malleable, like you said. But Smritis come from time to, you see many Smritis from time. Manu Smriti happened to be famous because I think somebody translated it into English, and that is how it became famous.
Correct. Yeah.
Like how Sufi poet got translated into English, and Rumi became very famous because he just happened to be translated into English.
Exactly.
Right? So somebody must have translated Manu Smriti into English. And tell us about, from time to time, do you think that as as time changes, they amend that, like makes amendments to these. So tell us about.
It's exactly as you said, Mahodaya. And then the idea of Smriti itself is like, we the Indic knowledge system has an understanding that the Smritis or the rules of the law of the land are malleable, that change with the time, that evolve with the time. And the fact that we have various Shandilya Smriti, Parashara Smriti, Manu Smriti, all those things at various time phases given importance to, that shows that we are open to the idea of evolving the laws according to the time, to the place, and Kala Desha Vartamana, right? And Manu Smriti exactly happens to be, like as you said, it was Wilson who translated that, and when the British
who did it, Mahodaya?
It was Wilson.
Wilson translated.
Wilson, yeah.
Okay. One of the British.
Correct. The story is that when the British were trying to find what is the code that they want to establish, the Hindus didn't seem to have the code. At least they were not aware of anything. It was very clear for them on what the Muslim for the code for Muslims.
The Sharia law,
right? And then when asked around, and someone must have pointed him to her, we have Manu Smriti, and then Manu Smriti got translated, and then it became very popular. And it's more popular for various reasons, and controversial and whatnot. When we look at Manu Smriti, we have to understand what was the time frame it was based upon, and what it even let's take it at face value. If you take we'll talk into some of the slokas more detail, right? Even if you look at the structure of Manu Smriti, the very first chapter and the very last chapter are very philosophical. They talk more about self and realization, and there is no idea of discrimination in whatsoever for across any time period, right? The first chapter and the last chapter, mostly last chapter. But then when we go into the inner chapters, that's where more rigid, more specific kinds of this rule for this particular person.
The do's and don'ts, I think, right?
Correct. They come in and they are very prescriptive in the coming chapters. But to step back, I think the idea is that we were open to the idea of that Smritis evolved. It is not static, and Smriti should reflect. So maybe we can have a Rajeev Smriti this time or whatnot that suits for.
Even the Indian law has taken some of its laws from Manu Smriti, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
But I do not know about that to comment upon, but I can see why not, because our penal code IPC was largely based upon what was implemented by the British, and then when the British were codifying Hindu law, personal law, they were referring to or they were leveraging upon, right? But just to be clear, our constitution clearly, banned any caste-based or any best discrimination very early on, right? So yeah, but let's pause there, and then before we go into Manu Smriti, let's double back and let's establish that, right? Like what Swadharma is. That is, simplest definition. What is the right thing for a person to do? What is one's dharma? What is one doing? And essentially, it is to answer the question of what is the right thing to do. What is the framework of that we can operate so that we get to do what we want to do, like we can pursue our pursuits without affecting others, without affecting the society and the sustainable society, right? Like so that we have an idea of like individual choices and the societal choices, and they both go together. And how do we operate upon? And that is the idea of Swadharma. And so
do you think that it is because of this dharma and Swadharma the Indian society lasted for such a long time, while many cultures and like ancient cultures went into disintegration? The Indian society lasted for such a long time. Is it? It must be because of some underlying instructions and rules of the game, right?
I have two viewpoints on this one. One, yes, I think seems to be, as even though the Smritis change with the time, but the foundation is built upon the Vedas. We seem to be the society is built upon the foundation that's given with the Vedas, right? So thus continuity has continued to exist. Like, and then we seem to know, we seem to understand, we seem to agree upon throughout India, right? Like, the idea of karma, the idea of rebirth, the belief in, some creation.
Punarjanma and karma.
Yeah. So those things have continued, and then you can call it like, that has sustained. But I also have a slightly different viewpoint on if we have we always been this rigid as the caste system has been? The Swadharma is tied to caste system, and caste system has been birth based, at least for near in the last few centuries. Has it always been like this? That's an interesting question that I'm still trying to find more and more answers to. And there are some early indications that show that may not have been, right. And let's walk through the examples of how Swadharma was determined, and if it is based on Varna, how Varna was determined. And we'll take the examples of the definition of Swadharma based on Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata, and Manu Smriti. And you can see the difference between how rigid or how flexible or how malleable the idea of Varna was. And that's one evidence. The second evidence is unrelated to Swadharma is DNA-based studies, right? I'll have the link sent to you later. But when we looked into the DNA-based studies, when was endogamy? When did Indian society become endogamous? Like, when did we start marrying within the tribes? Marrying within the caste? There was a study that I went across, and then that put forth a number of about 1,000 years ago, right? From the time of study, that puts it into around 30 generations or 33 generations or whatnot. And one of the authors first suspected that it is aligning with the rise of the empires, Gupta Empire in the north, and then Chola Empire in the south, as the time period when we became very ossified, when we became endogamous. But and a counterpoint was given that it is given that this is like 10,000 years ago, and then life expectancy was not like 30 years or whatnot, but you cut down to 25 years of average of a generation. It takes us back to the time period of Islamic invasions. So there is another new thought process that comes across to figure out like whether Indian society or the Hindu society was always this ossified, or was that malleable or more flexible, right? And we will look into some evidences from our scriptures themselves in, is there merit to that discussion? And we'll continue on that part. So summary of that is like two thought processes. Are you saying yes, there is a continuity, and irrespective of all the invasions and the foreign rules, the idea of dharma continues to exist in India because of these two things, right? One, we have had the continuity of the tradition of continuity in the thought process of what dharma is, and continuing that. Two, at some point we became very like a cocoon to protect the entity, or protect the essence, and that seems
became more defensive, I would say, right? More defensive, more protective, because of the invasions and destruction of many of these literature
and that is a time frame that I'm thinking that my hypothesis that that's a time frame that we became more rigid society rather than more from a seeker into society to more of a believer follower society.
So let me kind of give a quick perspective of where we are at in this discussion. So we are talking about Swadharma. What does an individual to do in his life? What are the goals of an individual? And the Vedas and the primary text, which is Shruti, and the secondary text, they gave us certain instructions on what an individual has to do, while allowing certain freedom of interest. Pursue your own interest, but you have to follow certain rules of the land based on ethics, based on certain ethics for the well-being of the individual and well-being of the society.
Right.
And we have smrutis that were changing from time, not changing in some ways from time to time, but there are certain precepts that are common throughout the smrutis, throughout the ages. But you are saying that at some point in the past there was intermixing of the varna. I want you to talk about varna also, Mahodaya, in a moment, because that is another topic that is a hot topic these days, but also a topic that is highly misunderstood. And we say, Krishna said, Chaturvarnyam Maya Srishtam Gunakarma Vibhagasha Satya Kartaram Api Mam Vidya Kartaram Avyayam. All those things in the Bhagavad Gita. What is Varna? So in the past, based on the individual's guna and karma, you have the Swadharma determined. So I want you to take it from here.
Thank you. I want to slightly differentiate. I think the idea that the Swadharma is based on one's Varna. But what is Varna based on is, there seems to be a time period when we think that Varna is based on guna and karma, like your action and virtues, not your birth. The quote, the sloka that you quoted from Bhagavad Gita, it clearly says, Lord Krishna says that he created the Varnas, Chaturvarnyam, based on one's guna and karma, not necessarily based on one's birth. So that's an indicator that at some point it was largely upon one's actions and one's virtue rather than one's birth.
So, for example, give an example, Mahoday. So you have a person who is scholarly and whose son is also interested in scholarly work. So he would continue that, so he would become a pandita or pandit. But there is another person who is like a pot maker, who makes pots and things like that. So, and his son also is interested in it. He continues. So give us a couple examples.
No, I will take a little bit further that, right? Like,
Okay.
Mahabharata says, Bhagavad Gita says that, he's talking about, Lord Krishna says how the Varnas are created. And then I don't see the evidence that Varnas are created by birth, right? But by going by sloka alone. And if you go further into Mahabharata, like take into examples of a lot of discussions, there are like more than 150 references to the word Swadharma in the epic, right? That shows in Mahabharata. Like if you look at the critical edition of Mahabharata and do a word search for Swadharma, there are more than 150 references, and these references are in various contexts, like clarifying questions, clarifying discussions, conversations. But and in out of this, around 70 are coming from Shanti Parvan and Anushasana Parvan, which are largely spoken by Bhishma on his deathbed. Like he's on the bed of thorns, arrows, and even at that time, Yudhishthira is asking questions to, what are the responsibilities of a king? What are the responsibilities of a priest? What are responsibilities in terms of apatkala, in terms of war and whatnot, right? But if you look at this context of these discussions, there are different speakers, right? Speakers from different realms of the society. That clearly shows that everybody had the idea of what Swadharma is, and everybody understood the idea of Swadharma is, and it is not limited to a certain sect, right? Sutta speaks early on. Yaksha speaks at the Vanaparvan. The snake speaks, Sarpa talks about it. Pandu, Hidimba, Dhaumya, Draupadi, Bhima, Hanuman, Markandeya, all we go into these discussions, right? And one particular conversation is of very interest that a hunter has it with Kaushika, and Kaushika is the Brahmin who gets angry with a lady, with a grihastha, with the householder lady, and because like she is delayed in giving him bhiksha, and then he tries to question her, and then he says like, dude, you don't understand what's going on. Go talk to this hunter, this guy. But and in Mithila, right? And he goes on and on, and he talks about what Swadharma is and what a great.
So the hunter, you mean?
No, the Kaushika, the Brahmin goes to a hunter, and the hunter explains what.
The lady sends the Brahmin to the hunter to learn about what is a Swadharma, because he questions her. Yes. What it is not your dharma to give you the bhiksha.
And he's angry because like his bhiksha is getting delayed, and she says, dude, I have my responsibility to take care. That's why I got delayed. You don't understand the idea of what Swadharma is. You better go learn from that hunter. And the Kaushika, the Brahmin, goes to the hunter, and then the hunter explains the Brahmin what Swadharma is and what particular king is doing, Janaka is doing to protect Swadharma is, and things like that, right? And
a large section of the society, irrespective of their birth, understood what dharma is, and then they are in agreement, I guess, right?
Agreed. And then what is also I'm saying that is like, it wouldn't have been possible if it is restricted to a birth-based, right, a discriminatory society, right? So they understood what everybody is open to, everybody has a shared understanding of Swadharma, and everybody has access to being like, following that. That's what I'm trying to arrive at. And then more specifically, I can give examples of like, Yudhishthira being asked questions on who's a Brahmin and then his responses and whatnot. But this is an example of, you would imagine that if the learning and if the concept of dharma, or if the question of right and wrong is limited or more prescriptive based on a birth, then there is no possibility of hunter explaining to the Brahmin what Swadharma is. But the fact that a hunter is explaining that to the Brahmin, so it just shows that everybody had an understanding, a shared understanding of what Swadharma is.
Yeah.
And
did you mention Nahusha Prashna?
Yeah, I will. Yes, Nahusha
Yeah, we'll
Prashna
get
is there, and then yes, and Yaksha Prashna is there.
Yaksha Prashna.
Yeah, Yaksha Prashna is when like Yudhishthira is being asked on the question of like I'll give you some
get to
exact quotes, but the when the hunter is also when talking about Swadharma, right? But he says Swadharma iti kritva tu na tajami dvajotama. The hunter says, I know what my Swadharma is. I'm not going to let go of that. I'm not going to renounce that, right? And so that clearly shows he understood what his responsibility is, and he's happy and he's doing that. And he's also giving examples of like, Brahmana ko, and he goes examples of further explains in, Mithila, Janaka is protecting whoever is doing the right thing and thing. And then keep that in mind when Krishna says, like, it's important to do one's own duty. It's okay. It's important to do one's own duty, albeit with mistakes, than doing someone else's jobs perfectly.
So tell us about that. So Krishna Swadharme Nidhanam Shreya Paradharmo Bhayavaha. What that means is, like you just said, so you stick to your own dharma, don't transgress into some other dharma. And I think Krishna is talking in generality here, right? So it does not mean that, it appears, I don't know if he means 100% of it, or if he means in general, stick to your dharma. But sometimes if you feel, if an artist's son, or if you're an artist, but you also got interested in medicine, you pursue that at some point. Or tell us about what Krishna, what is going on there?
So here, I think let's clarify here, right? Like now, Krishna first of all, Bhagavad Gita all about responsibilities. It's do your duty, do your responsibility. There is no karmanya vadikarastu ma palesa karachana. Second thing, when it comes to responsibilities, do your own work, right? Do your own work better. Even try to do your own work, and then even if it's flop, it's okay. And then what is my work? That comes from what my varna is. Right? So, but what is my varna? It's not that because I'm born into a varna, it's because it's based on my actions and my virtues. So it's kind of step by step, right? If you go into that, essentially, it's not because I'm born to a carpenter that I need to become a carpenter, but my action is carpenter, and my interest.
My interests are carpenter. My predilections are
correct. Yeah. Then I become then my varna is that, and then I do my duty. If my interests are around learning Vedas and my interest is about educating others, and my varna, and then my actions, I get prepared for that. I'm prepared for that life. Then I'm a Brahmana, not because I'm born to a Brahmin parents. Like that seems to be the thing that Lord Krishna is emphasizing on, right? And we will see more evidence to this particular part, right? Like, is it because of birth or not? Let's take an example of what the serpent, the Nahusha was asking, right? Mm-hmm. He's asking, hey, who is a Brahmana and what should be known? And then Yudhishthira says, oh, foremost of serpents, he is asserted by the wise, in whom are seen truth, charity, forgiveness, good conduct, benevolence, observance of the rights of his order, and mercy is a Brahmana. So nowhere Yudhishthira answers that it's because he's born to a Brahmin parents that becomes a Brahmana. He's saying he's asserted by the wise, in whom are seen truth, charity, what is the shloka here?
Charity, compassion, purity.
Yes. All those things, conduct, benevolence, observance of the rights, is a Brahman, right? Similarly, in Yaksha Prashna also, like later on, he is asking, what is there a specific path? is there one thing that it is correct? Then Yudhishthira says, no, I haven't seen any single rishi that we can follow. Like, it's not possible to answer by one, right? Just give me 1 minute, please. I'll get the.
Yes. So somehow this idea got, like you said, ossified or fossilized in our culture, that it is only through. Of course, it is hard to distinguish between. I mean, you are born to a Brahmin, or you're born to a Kshatriya, you become or Vaishya or Sudra, whatever that is. You become that. But then again, it doesn't mean that you have to live that way. It is also, you still have the freedom to choose, apart from, go out of what was, how you were born or where you were born into, and then pursue, at least at that time, at least during the time of Mahabharata, I would say.
Correct. I agree. And even in within Mahabharata, we see like little bit of differences, right? So in Yaksha Parvan, then again is asking more clear, direct question: by what birth, behavior, study, or learning does the person become a Brahmana? Tell us with certitude. Yudhishthira answers, O Yaksha, it is neither birth, nor study, nor learning that is the cause of Brahmanahood. Without doubt, it is behavior that constitutes it. So there's a clear definition, there's a clear understanding that it is not birth-based, but it's by one's behavior. One's behavior should always be well guarded, especially by a Brahmana. He who maintains his conduct unimpaired is never impaired himself, is never impaired himself. Right? Professors and pupils, in fact, all who study the scriptures, if addicted to wicked habits, are to be regarded as illiterate wretches. He only is learned who performed his religious duties, even has studied the four Vedas, is to be regarded as a wicked wretch, scarcely if his conduct be not correct.
Mahoday, let me ask you an unconventional question here.
Yes.
After all, we don't want to stick with the stock questions and stock answers.
Correct.
So at this point, when there is so much of this emphasis and discussion going on between the heroes of the Mahabharata, like Yudhishthira and Krishna and them, so is it because in the society where they live, there was already some all this doubt and question, and there is some discrimination going on, and through this dialogue they are trying to clarify that? You think it is because of this kind of discrimination? I don't want to use the word discrimination, because of this confusion that is going on between what is Swadharma of a person. Is it based on the birth, or is it based on the Varna, or based on the Guna Karma? And Krishna is trying to answer that. Bhishma and Yudhishthira, and Yaksha and Yudhishthira, and Nahusha and Yudhishthira, all these conversations keep coming up. Do you think it is because it's already going on, and through these conversations they're trying to clarify and give us some guidance?
So these are all eternal questions, right, Mahodaya? So we have been trying to answer these questions, and we're still figuring out what is the right thing to do is an eternal question. And so Mahabharata being the fifth Veda, right? It is all about, it's a Moksha Shastra. It's all about what is the right thing to do. It's all these discussions and conversations establish two things, right? One, the question of what is the right thing to do, what am I supposed to do, all those things. And two, like over and over, it's repeatedly, it's stressing, and it is stressing from various angles, right? From various actors or various folks, right? Of course, Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita being the Lord of the song of the Lord, and that's the ultimate. But you can see that these questions are coming up in various contexts, various places, various occasions, and all talking about these things, right? It just shows the importance of finding the right thing to do, and so that I can do what is right, and I can do in the context of dharma, in the limitations provided by the society, and it doesn't affect others. Similarly, like other person can also do that, and we have a sustainable society. That's what it all points down to. And And I want to take to a little bit more more relevant to what current terms, right? Like, I think we talked about it, but we are in a society where lot of people, at least in the US, call themselves religious or agnostic or whatnot. So the role of scriptures is becoming less, right, in determining what is right. And another point that I wanted to, sorry, before I go, do you have any questions on the topic?
No, I was going to actually ask that question. What if somebody says, all this, the dharma shastras and all those come to people who say, yes, I abide by the Vedas and the dharmas and the religion and whatnot. What if somebody comes and says, no, I don't believe in all that. I don't have to abide by it. I don't subscribe to all the religion and this and that. And I'm agnostic. I'm like a charvaka. I'm a materialist. I don't care about what it is. I don't even care about Buddhism or Jainism, Bauddha dharma or Jaina dharma or Sikha dharma, So I'm agnostic. So to that person, what is a Swadharma? I'm not saying Swadharma. To that person, what are the goals of their life? What are the prescriptions?
Correct. So there are two things that look at, right? One, yes, I agree that, we, like a charvaka that we talked about, there is no rules, right? The question then becomes not moral or ethical, it becomes legal or illegal. And even that legal or illegal becomes like, it's legal until one is caught. That's what
but the legal and illegal part should also be based on some ethical ground principles, right? So don't hurt your neighbor,
Correct. So, and we there are multiple layers to this, right? I think what is the significant thing is, one, yes, people don't, or it is not relevant, or if someone is rejecting them, like that's it. But the laws of the land they're not dropped. Like they have evolved over a period of time, and I'm sure, like, there are influences from this. But what we have to take from the scriptures is, even though they are not like, you can discard them, but you can look into, can you find alternatives? Can you find some solutions even for this kind of societies? That is the way that I would approach the scriptures. I would suggest not taking literally, but trying to understand. Let's go into some specific examples, right? Even in a very supposedly rigid law book like Manu Smriti. In Manu Smriti, in one of, you can say that it is all about, it's very rigid definition of varna, and varna is based on, like, from Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata to Manu Smriti, you can see a clear degradation, right? Mahabharata, Lord Krishna says it's based on virtues and actions. And overall Mahabharata, there seems to be questions coming on and on and on. And some places we see that it is clear definition of, like, a Brahmana is not by birth, but it's by contact. But in some places there is like, hey, I'm a Kshatriya, I need to fight, like things like that. But when it comes to Manu Smriti, it's very, very clearly, rigidly written, right? Okay. From the Purusha, like, whatnot, from which part of that Brahmana is born, and certain part like Kshatriya is born, and things like that. And it's attached to someone's birth, and it's not going to change. That's how Manu Smriti defines it. And right on, it defines this is what Brahmanas are supposed to learn yajnas and learn Vedas and perform yajnas. Kshatriya is supposed to protect people and give danas, like things like that are very rigidly defined. But even there, if you look into this one, right, there is a section that the chapter that talks about the 16 karma samskaras, right? Right after this describing everything for a boy, it says you have to do all these things for a girl, right? You would not expect. I was taken aback by that particular verse, the saying that you have to perform all this for a girl, right? Similarly, later on, it talks about, even though it talks about the varnas are very rigid, later chapters talk about there is a progression of jatis, right? Like supposedly lower caste can go up, like that. Of course, it was not very immediate. It said like 5 generations or 7 generations, things like that. But the idea of mobility of caste was also accommodated by Manu Smriti. And then there are like, you define, there are chapters going into priests, what's supposed to do, what kings are supposed to do, and then what punishments and whatnot. Towards the end, there is a chapter specifically focused on apatkala dharma, what happens when everything goes haywire. I would say that like we are in that kind of situation, right? Like, there is not a specific law or whatnot. And there you can see, they give an example of Vishwamitra eating, it's okay to eat dog's meat if you have to survive. Give an example of Vishwamitra doing that, right? So things like that are explained, which what I'm trying to say is that if we read Shastras carefully, if you read between the lines, if we take away our preconceived notions on these are rigid, these are inflexible, like that, we will find answers, and we can find answers, right? Like whether Vishwamitra can eat meat, or whether Yudhishthira is saying Satyam Dhanam Kshamakshilam. So there are indications that where we can find answers to our current questions. And the current questions, even though they look new to us, like finding right and whatnot, those are eternal. Think about Yaksha's question to Yudhishthira, what do you find amusing? And Yudhishthira answers, day in and out, people see others die, but they somehow think that they are immortal. And that is still relevant. So what it tells us is like, if someone is interested in looking up to Shastras to find answers to the questions that are relevant today, without assuming the supremacy or, without assuming the rigidity of a scripture, they can still find answers. We just have to be a little bit more patient. We should not try to reinvent the wheel, and we should be more open-minded. And then one point that I would like to stress is like, don't take things literally, right? Like, yes, there are verses that Manu Smriti says some Brahmana is born from the head and whatnot, but taking literally would either mean rejecting the scriptures, right? It's discriminatory, not relevant to our current, or upholding to the T. There are certain things that are obviously like, it is not correct, or it's not possible, or it is not relevant. So we should be able to discard that or find different meanings that are more relevant to the current questions. So that's how I would look into Shastras to find answers if someone is interested. That's kind of my summary on can Shastras help to find current answers?
Yeah, so that's great. So is Manu Smriti more like a constitution of their time, or is it more like a law book of their land? Because law book, I don't know the real difference between what the constitution says, what the law book says, but I do know that the difference. But I have a feeling that maybe these come together in Manu Smriti, because it's a book of do's and don'ts. But I don't want to focus too much on the Manu Smriti because it's only one Smriti of so much that we have. I don't want to distract or divert our attention just into one part. But I know you are giving an example for what is a Smriti, what has one to do in terms of Swadharma. But like you said, I'm an agnostic. I don't care what Vedas, Shastras say. Is there such a thing at all? Even they have to, because I can say I'm religious, but then I have to follow the constitution. I have to follow, otherwise I'll get into trouble, right? I just can't drive on the left side of the road or right side of the road, depending on the country, that you live in, and then just say it's my will. I don't believe in the law of the land. I'll just do whatever I like. So those type of things. So even for somebody who does not believe in, who is irreligious, who is agnostic, who does not care for the religion of their land, they still have to abide by it. So this Swadharma, it's a very interesting concept, Mahodaya, because it helps individual to not go into degradation, denigration, because if I don't have certain laws to myself, I cannot be a good father, good husband, good son, and so on. So I think this idea of Swadharma tells us, depending on the role you are playing, these are the set of instructions that we recommend. And if you don't do that, I don't know if you will be punished for not doing it, or I think they also mentioned about you'll be punished in this Janma and you may be punished in the next journey.
Agreed. I think that's a fundamental ask of this, right? Like, all these, to answer your question, I see Manu Smriti more as the law of the land, or the code book at some point, because Constitution gives, at least Constitution is more of guideline and is less prescriptive, more interpretive. Manu Smriti is more prescriptive and less interpretive. It's very clear on what is do and don't, right? Like, but Mahabharata or other Shastras are not, like they are more more interpretive, right? You can interpret. So that's my personal view, but I might be wrong on that.
Yeah.
And the law of the land is required always, like to keep the society intact, right? I think, and then what is correct now might be seen as wrong later on, or what is seen as wrong right now might be perceived as later, right? Like
we're already seeing some of a flavor of that. Like recently, the Supreme Court of India slashing this. I think it's in same-sex marriage and things like that.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, and then not only that, like you take an example, right? In the many states in the U.S. Legalized possessing marijuana, right? That's an example. And you look at the thousands of cases that thousands of folks are incarcerated for possessing marijuana, right? But now. Right, but the key thing that you note here is that when we have evidence for changing what is correct, what is wrong, we should be open to that, and that is what I would take back to. When you look at our scriptures, there is an understanding of what is eternal, but what is changing, right? They were open for changes along as a society changes. Yes. Instead of very dogmatic one book religions, instead of this is your 10 commandments or this is your book, one book, we had. So it is difficult in this case because like the less prescriptive things are more for open for interpretation, and it makes your job difficult. But it's a better system, right? Like things evolve. And what we saw as what we are seeing as wrong right now might be seen as right later, and then scriptures provide a way to accommodate that. At least that seems to be the understanding. And this is where I would go take you back to, like, don't be very literal, right? If you keep it very literal, then there'll be a camp that will say we have to follow everything to the T, and that's not going to go with the times. Yeah. And you brought in this question again, like, what to do if I don't respect the law, right? Right now, yes, if there is no way to enforce what's going to happen in next life, like it's not perceivable. What is going to happen this life is what matters, and largely where you are living, what is the law of the land is going to guide. There may be some exceptions, there may be some caveats, there may be some but you have to adhere to the law of the land. That's what it's going to be. And interesting that I would like to bring in here what Krishna said about doing one's responsibilities, right? It is more applicable to current societies in corporate world. I might be interested in something, I may be very passionate about AI and ML, but my business does not need that. My management train is not going to appreciate that. My company is not going to appreciate that. My responsibility defined by my role and my business objectives, KRs or OKRs or whatever you call that. And I need to do that. Even if I don't do it very well, but I need to do that. But instead, if I do something else completely different and very well, I'm not going to be rewarded. I mean, I might be even like ding, right? Maybe.
Or if you're so passionate and persuaded to do that, then you go out of this role and do something different and stick to that within the roles of that.
I agree. But what I was trying to say is that the idea of doing one's responsibilities even not very well seems to be relevant even now, right? The question comes up, how do you define or how do you find those responsibilities, right? That is what. So there are some pointers to it. Earlier it was based on Varna, now it's based on my roles and interests and whatnot. And but the idea remains the same.
Yeah. So this is exciting, Mahodaya. So I want to ask you something slightly different. You have studied all this. You've studied Mahabharata, you did MA, you are pursuing a PhD in Hindu studies, and I know you have done a lot of studies on yoga shastras, and so on. What made you get into this? You are an IT professional, but how did you get interested, and where are you from actually? So where did you grow up? Is it like childhood? There's some influences from childhood that made you, because most of us, I grew up in a place in Guntur in Andhra Pradesh, where we used to live right next to a temple. I used to go to the temple, and there was some influence from there, and I was very, very much interested in what Shastras. And how did your interest develop in these Indian knowledge systems?
We all come from Brahman, right? No.
Right.
I grew up in a small town, Mahodaya, called Madurantakam, at the town of temple town of Erikatarama, right? So the Erikatarama
In Tamil Nadu.
In Tamil Nadu. It's a small town about I want to say 90 kilometers or 80 kilometers away from Chennai. Back then, when you are if you have to go down south to a large town, so you have to cross Madurantakam. It has a big lake, huge lake, and you wouldn't miss it. And a very famous Rama temple, right? So growing in that town has been and a very simple middle class upbringing, and that has been my influence. And I would say it was not a very orthodox, but more traditional, more exposure to the traditions, I would say. Madurantakam, interesting, also has the Veda Patashala, but I didn't go there. I went to a CBSE school. Influential persons include my Hindi tutor and my physics teacher growing up, and they were very significant in shaping my what you call as morality and values. But then, so that interest in going back or learning was always there. But then, of course, I got into IT, computer science, and whatnot, and then moved to the US, got into the samsara and kids and whatnot. But then, about 4 or 5 years ago, after my father passed away, then things, kind of questioning about what my role and what my Swadharma is and what I want to do. Those things kind of what my foundation is. And it attracted towards me to learning Sanskritam, and I did Samskrita Bharati courses for a year, and then I got ambitious and then took the MA entrance test, and then got cleared, and then we got the opportunity to study together. Around the same time is when also, basically the interest came along more about formalizing my Sanskrit education. I was looking for, can I do masters in Sanskrit or PhD in Sanskrit? And at that point, it was Hindu studies was available online, and my limitations are doing everything online. So I joined with HUA, Hindu University of America, to do my PhD. And once I started my PhD is when I got into the MA Sanskrit, and we got a chance to go together. So
before that, you did a master's program in Cincinnati, right? So
yes, you are
so you missed that part. Yeah.
No, I missed that part. That's correct. I skipped that part. Yeah, I did my bachelor's in undergrad in India and then master's in Cincinnati. And then I went back to India to work for Intel for a couple of years, then joined Microsoft. And then I got married and kids and whatnot. And then after I got my green card, I explored the startup world and things like that. Then now I'm back to Microsoft.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm glad. So I think more and more of us are actually, while pursuing our primary, the one that makes or to pay our bills and other things, to have a retirement and everything else. So we are lucky to have some time, especially people living in US, I would say, because we get to have some time to pursue.
On a lighter note, it's more of a midlife crisis, I would say.
Midlife crisis, yeah.
But I'm fortunate that we have a chance to pursue this, right? So, and then I was seeing your video that you spoke about the MA Sanskrit classes, right? We had phenomenal teachers. Ramanujacharya was the one that you talked about. Phenomenal teacher, and he was very clear about what we are doing, right? He didn't mince his words about our
he didn't spare us.
Yeah, and he didn't spare us. He spoke only in Sanskrit, and then it was very hard for us to catch up. It was very first semester, but then eventually we survived and we managed to do that.
Yeah, that was the first time I realized there is so much in our Indian knowledge systems that we were never exposed. It is like sitting on a treasure cove and begging for alms, so that we didn't realize that there is so much right under our nose, and we're just ignoring all our life. Either not ignoring, I don't want to say ignoring, because we didn't know that there was such knowledge.
Our rights and reward system has changed, and then it was very difficult to build a life without getting into the westernized education, right? But now that we have the opportunity and we are doing, But on the note, Mahodaya, you wrote a book about, you wrote about,
Yeah. Talk about the book that you wrote. I'm sorry.
No. Before I talk about my book, you wrote about your Shastras, right? And then it's interesting.
Writing,
You're writing a book on Shastras, right? And then the
Darshanas, actually.
Darshanas. Sorry, Darshanas. So you hinted upon the Purusharthas, and when we talk a lot and variety, this ocean of literature, right? All of them are aligning towards moksha.
Yes.
And the way that they are guiding us is towards the eternal liberation, like the ultimate happiness, and in the guardrails of dharma, right? Let's you can pursue your pursue towards earning wealth, pursue desires, do everything, but in the guardrails of dharma. Dharma provides
in the guardrails of dharma, in the limits of dharma.
In alignment with dharma, and everything goes towards liberation, right? And I was fascinated by the fact that the concept of liberation itself is so different, right? Charvaka says one death is liberation, that's it. And then you go into Buddhism says something, and then Jainism says something, Jainism says something. All of them have different definitions of moksha, but they all align in the idea of, at least most of them align in the idea of law of action, law of karma, and then what go in that, this is dharma, proceed with that. So I was very fascinated by that, and then at some point I want to talk a little bit more on that.
Oh yeah. That might be our next conversation podcast. On Swadharmas and how does each darshana or shastra define liberation. I have listed it down. Somebody sent me some kind of WhatsApp message. There are 21 different ways of attaining moksha, based on different shastra, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Puramimamsa, Uttaramimamsa, Jaina, all these things. So that will be also, but before we sign off today, so I want you to talk about your book, about the trilingual poems that you have written, that I had a chance to read them and write a foreword, but please tell us about the book and also where it's available for people to buy.
Thank you, Mahodaya. Thank you. And
a book written in Sanskrit.
Thank you, Mahodaya, and thank you for writing the forward for that one. Since you mentioned about six darshanas, as our next podcast preview, I'll show you this quick comparison, right? This is a quick comparison of six darshanas on major darshanas on. Are you able to see my screen?
Oh yeah,
right.
Great.
This is a very quick summary of what.
Can you put it in the? Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Right. What moksha is, and then so all of these darshanas, if you think about key aspects of it, what is the ultimate goal? That's a moksha. And then what are the pramanas? What are the evidences they take? No. And whether do they believe in the idea of Atman? Do they believe in karma? And do they believe in Ishvara, creator? So those are the key differences that you can summarize, and we can go into more and more. And what you can see is that almost all six darshanas agree on the concept of karma, right? And then the concept of Ishvara, the creator, it's very interesting to see, Sankhya does not call out, it's a Nirishvara Vada. And then Purvamimamsa, even though it's more ritualistic, it's less about God creating, but it's more about mantras themselves or devatas. But we will go into more details, but I couldn't stop my enthusiasm in sharing this.
No, this is outstanding, because people talk about darshanas, people talk about moksha, but very few know that each school of thought has their own version or their own definition of what is a moksha, how to attain it, and they have very prescriptive.
We think that it's a some state or some samadhi or whatnot, and then Advaita calls Brahmajanam and Nyaya calls Atyanta Dukha Nivritti, right? So, but yeah, we will go into that, and then now back to my book on the plug into my book. So this generally I'll give you as we are learning, as we are progressing on masters. We also went through the pandemic period, right? So it was
masters in Sanskrit. You mean?
Yeah, masters in Sanskrit.
Yeah.
Sorry, masters in Sanskrit. This period also, we've also went to the global pandemic. So it gave me a lot of opportunity to I observed things around me, and then various things inspired me, right? Now, very simplistic to very, very profound. And I captured
The
them
most mundane to the most
profound.
spiritual.
Thank you. Yeah. And then I captured them into my poems, and then I also pushed myself to make it like the inspiration could come in Tamil or English or Sanskrit, whatnot, but I converted that inspiration into trilingual poem. And so we have
Trilingual, English, Sanskrit. Oh yeah,
English,
okay.
English,
Yes.
Sanskrit, and
Awesome.
English, Sanskrit, and Tamil. So I named it Emerald Maṇi Pravāla. So Maṇi Pravāla is an ode to the style of Maṇi Pravāla style of writing, right? Maṇi Pravāla style was, we used to write. They used to write in a combination of Tamil and Sanskrit. Parayadu Dadimishram Padi Tailabhishekam, which means that line, for example, Parayadu is the fermented, the old rice, right? Parayadu Dadimishram mixed with curd.
Sure. So that is a style of writing where you mix two languages.
Correct. It was much before. It was around the time of birth of Malayalam. I don't remember the centuries, but it used to be a very popular style back in South India, combining Tamil and Sanskrit together. And then now living in Seattle, the Emerald City, and then bringing in English. That's what I named it. Emerald.
Okay, I was wondering where the emerald comes from.
Emerald
I thought maybe
Emerald is an ode to the city that I live in. So Emerald Maṇi Pravāla. And this book, I want to acknowledge that all the images generated are using DALL-E. That's an generative AI tool. So basically, I gave the.
So you're using the technology and the art, where the art and science come together.
Come together. And to excite the audience, I want to read a simple one. And this was inspired by a lone tree by the creek. Okay, so I named it Sakshi. And let me actually take the blur off so that I can show that on the video, or at least let me see if you are able to see that. So you can see.
Yeah, if you take off the blur, we can see it. Otherwise, it's kind of going away from the focus.
Okay, and then I will take my blur off. Okay.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So look at the image, for example. Let me start with this. This is the book. It's a simple.
Yes.
Okay.
And all the images are generated with AI.
All the images are generated, including the top one. So this is you can see that the prompt I gave was something to do with the Maṇi Pravāla, ruby and whatnot on top of Sanskrit or manuscript, and it gave a weird font, but it looks like you can see that there are beads on top of a manuscript, right? So similarly, all the images instead are created using a generative AI tool. And I want to read. We talked about pursuits, and there is a poem on pursuits, but I would recommend reading book from the book. But as I said, things about mundane, right? Like this is an image of nicely captured a lone tree by the creek. And then during the pandemic, I was taking a lot of walk, and I noted a nice little tree by the creek, and that inspired me for this poem. And let me read this. Nillamal odum odai nidamoru karai sollum sakshiyai naan. Nillamal odum odai nidam oru karai sollum sakshiyai naan. The stream runs non-stop, narrating countless stories. I am the witness. The stream runs non-stop, narrating countless stories. I am the witness. Ananta vahati nirjari katitva bahavaha kataha ahameva sakshin. Ananta vahati nirjari katitva bahavaha kataha ahameva sakshin. It is a very simple.
Yeah, wonderful, Mahodaya. So go ahead. I couldn't.
No, please go ahead. I would appreciate. Whatever comes to your mind, but I share the where it came from. But please go ahead.
Yeah. No. Immediately it occurs to me that you're talking about an individual's life where you go through that life of various drama that goes on with your life in and around you. But then there is something that is constant, that's watching or that is experiencing it. Like for instance, when I say I looked at myself in the mirror 30 years ago, I look at myself in the mirror, that who is looking is the same, but the appearance is changing, right? So you tell me about what you thought about it. That is exactly immediately that comes to my mind.
I align that. Thank you. I captured that. Yes, that's correct. And we are just witness on whatever goes around us, right? Whatever changes, whatnot. And the tree is the reflective of that witness. And similarly, you can also take it to a next level, right? Like, if you think about a creator or a Ishvara or a God is essentially a witness, right? at least Ishvara is generally a witness. So kind of combines all those things. Atman is a witness, or self is a witness, and Brahman is, Ishvara is a witness. All those things kind of take the profound meaning of that. And the mundane aspect is like a simple tree all by itself, by a lone tree by the creek. And it's just a moment of, being in that moment, observe that it came to my mind. So that's about it, right? So these poems, these are some inspirations from simple things. It could have a little bit more in-depth meaning, and I leave it to the.
No, this is great. I mean, some of the simplest poems are the most profound poems.
Thank you. And if you noticed it, some of the small poems, I try to meet the haiku meter. At least one of them, if not all three, at least one language would meet the haiku meter. So
what is a haiku meter?
The 5, 7, 5 syllables.
Oh, the chanda. Okay.
Haiku poems, right? So
haiku poem, the Japanese haiku poem.
Yes,
oh,
yes. So
nice. Okay.
Some of the small,
it's even multi-cultural.
I tried. Some of the larger poems I couldn't, but the shorter poems, I can guarantee at least one language will meet the syllable, if not all three. So I would appreciate, I'll share the link. I self-published it on Amazon. It's available both in Kindle and print version. So I request the audience to give it a try. I'm happy to.
I'll put the link in the description below, so the audience can can go and check it out. So the next topic I really want to dwell into, that Shaddarsanas, how they define moksha. What is a darshana to begin with? What is a shastra? What is a darshana? Who is talking about all? So this is going to be even more exciting.
Thank you, Mahadia. Let's talk about that. And before we sign off, I want to just put you on spot and say, what is your Swadharma? And also request the audience to leave comments here, right? What they think their Swadharma is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we'll start with that and then wrap it up.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Actually, I wrote an article. It's up on the internet. What is my dharma? That is, somebody asked me to write for their website. So I did many years ago. My Swadharma is at two levels. One is at the phenomenal level, at the transactional world, where I am taught. My Swadharma is to be useful to the society, right? And the way either I chose it or it happened to come to me is that I am a medical professional at that level, at the transactional level. And I'm also, based on my interests, either this janma or in the past janma, it is very difficult to define, but I'm drawn towards Shastras and Vedas and the question about, not just about the scholarly part of it. So I'm drawn towards understanding the existential nature of this world. Who am I? What is this world? What is my relationship with this Jagat? And who is responsible for this? So this kind of contemplative thinking and knowledge from it, share with others. That is one thing. The second mundane Swadharma is to help people come out of the suffering, and what best way to do than to help them heal their disease and illness. So that is my Swadharma at these two levels. One is the existential level. Who am I? What is my purpose? Learn and share. And then at the other level, transactional worldly level, heal others' sickness, and by being a medical doctor, I do that. And of course, when you are doing your job, the society rewards you, society respects and rewards you, and they make sure that the society, the world, the universe make sure that I go on with this by making sure that I pay my bills, I pay for my family, make sure that I sustain my family and so on. So that is the Swadharma, I always believe, has to always be looked at two levels. One is the transactional level. The second is at a more spiritual or existential level. So that I hope
beautiful.
I did. Yeah, I answered your
sharing.
question.
Thank you for sharing. That's beautiful. And then I see them all converge, right? Essentially, like it's about happiness and relieving someone's of physical illness is your Swadharma as a physician, and then relieving someone's of from the bringing happiness from a spiritual aspect is your other thing. So thank you for sharing that.
Come together. Yes, thank you, Mahodaya. So I would like to have another conversation on the darshanas, the moksha shastras, and all those things. So this is very exciting. So I look forward to talking to you. Thank you for sharing your time, sparing your time and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you for your opportunity, Mahodaya, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Om.